Welcome to Shoe Studio. It's Paris Fashion Week. I actually just got back from Paris today, how authentically Parisian. And we're going to be talking about the Saint Laurent show, which is always a really good one because it kind of sparks loads and loads of discussion. And I think it's a particularly interesting season to talk about it because there's lots of new stuff kind of happening at Saint Laurent that no one was really aware of. It's probably not that new in the eyes of Eddie Simone, but obviously he's very guarded about his plans for the house. And there was this kind of huge interview that he did with Yahoo Style, which I'm sure you all saw, where he kind of laid out all these plans and answered a lot of the kind of questions and criticisms that have been levied at what he's doing at the house. And one of the things that came out of that was obviously the revival of the couture operation. So it's quite an interesting time for that house. I've got a fab set of panellists with me from different facets of the industry to help sort of unpick what's going on over in Paris. But before we kind of jump in, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, starting with you, Shonagh.
I'm Shonagh and I'm a curator at Somerset House.
I'm Katie Barron, I'm an author and a journalist, and I'm the retail director for an insights and innovation agency called Stylus.
My name's Reba Maybury and I'm the editor-in-chief of Song Blue magazine, a lecturer at St Martin's and the founder of Wet Satin Press.
And I'm John Michael O'Sullivan, I'm an architect and writer.
I think this is my best dressed panel that we've had so far. You all look really good, and I quite like how sexy it's at this end, like the shininess.
Waterproof.
Yeah, it's really, really good. I'm enjoying it. It's very sensual. Anyway, so I want to start by talking about that interview that I mentioned. Did you guys all have a chance to look at that conversation? What did we make of some of the things that Eddie Simone said? Because some of the things that stood out for me, I like that bit where he described when he took over the house and he said it was like turning the music off at a birthday party, and I thought that was really interesting. But also his approach, I think, was kind of detailed in a way that made some people, I think, feel slightly more sympathetic to him, and I think other people felt even more enraged. Things like, in one of the aspects that got a lot of press was this idea that they are starting couture, but he's going to sort of individually approve each couture request, so it's even more undemocratic, so that you can have the most money in the world, but if you're not cool enough, you can't wear it. What did you guys all think of some of the things he said in there? Was there anything that kind of stood out?
I thought there were a couple of things to me. I thought it was quite interesting the way that he sort of talked about wanting to go back to a place that was slightly less conceptualised, that was actually more about kind of feeling fashion than the conceptual aspect of it. Then on the flip side, it's interesting when you look at an interview like that, where actually the interview, a lot of, the way he's discussing it is quite over-intellectualised.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a bit of a contradiction, but then that's what he's all about. For me, that sort of contradiction that, you can kind of wrap up, if we're going to get into the kind of Emperor's New Clothes discussion, if you can wrap it up in kind of smart intellectual discussion, then can you kind of get away with anything? So I thought that was kind of fascinating because it was such a long interview. But I did think on the other side of it, I did appreciate that sentiment for kind of wanting to push away from sort of high concept all the time. And also the idea of kind of repetition, I thought was interesting, that actually kind of being a bit fearless about not worrying about repetition quite so much. And that's what makes him so contagious if you're on the love rather than the hate side of Eddie world. But,
you kind of made some noises in agreement there, Reba. What's your take on it all?
Oh God, I don't know. I think what you were saying about him turning the music off at the party is just an incredibly obnoxious thing to say. And what you're saying as well about the couture, you're not being cool enough. Well, I don't really know. I don't think what he's doing is cool at all.
Why do you say that? Because it's so much about kind of copying subculture?
Because it's about nostalgia, and nostalgia doesn't create anything new. And everyone has their own idea of what they think is cool or avant-garde or happening, or I don't know, whatever you want to say, but it's definitely not pretending that you're in the Rolling Stones. It's really naff, actually, like pretending you're just kind of like in this hazy bubble, because that's not, when we look back in history and we say what was really happening right now in 2015, it was not loads of rich kids pretending they were in LA in the 60s. What's really cool is people like being really political and angry, and not just like someone being like, you know what, rather than go to a vintage shop and find a frayed denim jacket, I'm going to go get my mum and dad to spend $1,000 on one. That's like not what it's about.
Yeah, because it's quite an easy buy-in, isn't it? I feel the same way, that actually if you've got, 700 quid to pet spare on a pair of boots, it's a very safe way to join a tribe. Yeah. And that kind of slightly bothers me, that there's nothing really sort of self-expressive about that. He talks a lot in that interview about kind of people, using people that self-express, but actually they look pretty similar.
There's nothing individual about it. Self-expression is about individuality, and this is about directly copying a photo of something that happened 30, 40, 20 years ago.
Yeah, it was interesting in that interview how much he talks about David Bowie, because it just felt so.
But if you're going to reference any rock star, why would you reference David Bowie?
Yeah.
I mean, why?
Yeah. I think that something that really stood out for me in that interview was he said in the early 2000s it stopped being about there was lots of interesting things going on for him, and interesting furniture design, interesting art, so fashion became a kind of amalgamation of that and a melting pot. And he would like, with what he's doing with Saint Laurent, to make something post that, so it forgets what else is going on and make something for itself. And I think that feels really out of kilter with actually not only how other people are working, because I don't think you should necessarily be influenced by your peers. I mean, fashion obviously is, that is what it's built on, but I think if that's something you've decided, that's great. But I think with all the technological innovation, the way in which artists are working, and that sharing through aesthetics and concepts and tools really, and how technology is becoming a tool that's moving ever so quickly, I think that felt a bit weird. I think that felt music, he obviously references, but you can't say music yes, everything else no. And I think it felt quite a little self-indulgent to think that those things aren't going to influence you really.
But I also think musically, if we think about what's happening in the world right now, rock and roll is not cool.
Yeah.
Like rock and roll is like this horrible corporate marketing package, and like the most interesting music happening right now is not like people pretending they want to be David Bowie. So it's just.
Do you not think he would argue that he is championing those kind of like, young kids who are doing interesting things with their music? Because he always.
Any band or musician that I think is genuinely interesting that's happening right now would never ever wear any of this.
But do you not
Point
think
blank.
they would take the opportunity to be played at the show or featured in
No.
No, and I think that's it actually. With what he did with Dior On was a really, really different time. And I think, having Pete Doherty walk in his catwalk.
Yeah, but that's even passé. Even when that happened, that was passé.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it's a kind of commercialisation of what was cool, and looking at that underground scene in London. And
but it wasn't underground then at that point.
Not by that point, but I think they were much more interwoven than what's, say, happening now. And I think it's not as quick a pickup, and it felt so nostalgic to something. I mean, I was living in London then. That's really, really recent, and it feels, I agree with you, so out of fashion.
But then if it's so out of fashion, why is it? Because the sales are kind of monumental. Like it's
because it's safe.
I think it's
really safe.
I think it's that tribe thing I was talking about again. I think it's it's a super identifiable tribe. It's going to come round. I'm sure what we're about to see is going to be exactly the same, more of it. And that's quite smart from his perspective.
And also these things can never go out of fashion either.
Yeah, it's very easy to join that, and it's very easy to join it and then not have a panic about the fact that you're not in fashion next season. Do you know what I mean?
I do agree with that safe thing, but I don't think safe contributes to the level of sales increases that there's been. Like it is, he's doubled revenue. Like sales went up like 27% in the first half of 2015. I agree safety is a big part of why people can wear it, but there's obviously something else that is sparking people to have that new interest in the brand.
I think it's deeply well packaged as well. Like, it's buying into something, and that works, and people identify with it. I thought it was really intelligent what he was saying on the flip side about how he had started again with certain elements so that everything aligned for him, and I think that's really good branding strategies, and I think that does make for a really successful business. So
it's just a weird, I suppose the thing for me is it's just a weird collision, because if it was Hedy Slimane in LA doing a brand, which would probably be these clothes, it'd be quite a small thing. It's the collision of that with Saint Laurent and everything that brings with it that kind of pulls it all together, and it's just bizarre. It's not a great way of summing it up, but I remember sort of when he kind of came back, and it was a bit like we had the Cavalli panel and we were talking about Peter Dundas coming back to a house he'd previously been at, and you kind of expect where it's going to go, and it goes somewhere else. And I guess at a certain point in Dior Homme, he kind of veered off from doing something that was very connected to a brand, and essentially started doing Hedy Slimane, and now he's carrying on doing that with this. And I remember when that first show happened, I was fairly kind of incredibly excited before it happened, and then incredibly unexcited afterwards. And I always remember reading, I think ID did a review that was by, I forget who it was by, but it was someone quite young that was just incredibly glowing, and it was like this person was almost discovering these incredibly hackneyed things for the first time.
Yeah.
And that's where you kind of go, well, is this the thing? It's just the fact that actually he's talking to those people.
But that's
It's
what's
not
strange,
kind of-
is he is talking. I agree with you, there is that element of people not having lived through it, but I do also agree with what Shonagh says, it's such recent history, like, you know, you only have to be, I think, over
But I think
22 to remember.
Or I've been in Zara recently.
Yeah,
But I think this goes deeper. You know, I was just in New York, and I never really understood what the word hipster meant as an English person until I went to New York, and then I really understood what the word hipster meant. And to me, a hipster is essentially a capitalist, consumerist idea of something alternative that capitalism can catch on to and sell. Right? It's like it's trying to make something alternative and not even subcultural, just something a little bit
Edgy.
and selling it. And if this isn't what this is, I don't know what is. I mean, for me, like looking at these images now, it's for people who are too scared to go into vintage shops or don't like the idea of wearing clothes that someone else has already worn.
Or want to make sure that what they're wearing is exactly the right.
Because, you know, in a way, like when you buy vintage clothing, it's an individual statement, and there is something very creative about going to a vintage shop. You're having to choose something which isn't being sold straight for you. You're having to create your own identity. But here, he's doing it for you. So it's just this kind of capitalist idea of being alternative in its purest form. And the price tags are disgusting, because everything I see here, we could go into Beyond Retro now and we could recreate every single one of these looks.
But is that a problem that fashion always draws in subculture? So do you think there's always going to be...
I don't think this is even subcultures. I think this isn't... I mean, looking at this
this
now,
is
what are we
more of
even
a-
looking at?
It's a very sort of contagious cliche, if
Yeah.
you like, isn't it? Really, and it's the same cliche every single season. That's the slightly tricky thing. It doesn't seem to be evolving at all.
It's that thing of what you expect from fashion, isn't it? Because every time I look at a Laurent show, it's not what I expect, and I have to think about, well, why isn't it? And it's because I expect fashion to do something, and to, if it has an idea, it takes it and it does
Yeah,
something, and it
completely.
surprises you, and it,
Yeah.
you know, makes you feel funny or not. And yeah, it just feels incredibly tiring. And I feel like I've stopped several seasons ago looking at the clothes and just looking at the reviews to see how people react to it.
But it
because
is
that's-
interesting because we're all like, you know, there's you know, all of us sitting here, and you know, I'm doing a couple of panels this season. I'm sure everyone else as well. And this is what I was really interested to come to. So that proves in itself that there is something fascinating about this kind of cult of Slimane. And I think, you know, we're definitely in an era where actually there is a bit of a backlash against, you know, everybody's this kind of the cult of the individual, but actually I think there are a lot of young people out there that are looking for something to belong to, and this is a very safe way.
But
to
I
do
don't
it
think this
otherwise.
relates to young people. I see this all the time where people talk about the reason this makes sense is because of young people. Like, young people are doing this and that's why this works. Young
This
people
doesn't
aren't buying
reflect
it.
youth culture.
Exactly, but it doesn't reflect youth culture. But also, I don't think this touches youth. It touches it in the sense that they're cast in the show and there are those like weird pop stars that like sit on his front row. But the people who are buying it, I'm sure there are some young people who are very rich.
It's
but
international buyers.
But it's like older people. You know, it's women who want a sparkly jacket.
But
or what
essentially,
have you.
all this collection is a styling. You take everything apart, and it's just a very basic piece of clothing, and that's another very comfortable and safe way of buying something. And older people, someone in their 40s, 50s, 60s could wear pretty much anything from here because you can take it all apart. It's a jacket, it's a t-shirt, it's a pair of trousers. Really, that's all it is.
So why does it split opinion so much?
Who likes it? I don't understand who likes this.
Everyone who buys it.
But who's buying it?
Loads of people.
You know, I know some
That is the problem.
people who love it. They love it. And I don't know whether that taps into their own nostalgia for what was quite recent history.
There are fashion writers who love it as well.
I also wonder if I mean, this is quite a weird thing to say, but obviously it's all in his eye, in his mind, and this is what he likes. And is he trying to therefore try and inspire people, the young, to dress like that? And I have been wondering, since I agreed to do this panel, might that shift? Because it doesn't agree with youth now, but will it start to have an impact? So high fashion impacting what young are buying and subcultural dress. versus the street influencing fashion, which is in recent
that's
history
what's
the
weird with
normal
this
way it would happen.
Because it's not actually relating to what's actually happening in the street right now, which is what I find. It's very narcissistic, though, elements of what he says in that interview. Like, he really talks about, they challenge him on the skinny white boy thing, and he talks about, feeling bullied when he was younger for being so skinny, and how people associated being skinny with kind of being queer, and how he's like packaged that, and he's very interested now in androgyny, and he talks about, which I find...
There's nothing androgynous about this.
Exactly.
This is completely heterosexual. This is completely white. There are no black models in this, which is grotesque. There's no Asian models. There's no Indian models. There's nothing. Well, I don't know why no one's speaking about this. So it's saying that nostalgia is this exclusive thing for privileged white people.
Well, that's what's really weird. It's in the interview he explicitly calls out, like, Bowie, and he talks about the thin white duke kind of identity and
I think we have to remember where rock and roll came from. It wasn't created by white people.
But it's strange, isn't it? I think that element where what he's trying to do is legitimize himself. I think he's trying to like package what he wanted to be and make it cool and sell it to people. So maybe people who identify with it also, there is something to do with insecurity and wanting to wear it. I thought that was quite interesting.
The thing is, if I saw someone walking down the street wearing this, I wouldn't think they were individual in any way at all.
I don't think I'd look twice.
No, you wouldn't look twice.
I don't think I would.
Well, if they're wearing all of it.
No, I wouldn't. This is a top shop.
Yeah, I think it does look so commonplace. It does. It doesn't look... Why do you think people don't make more about the how white has...
Because everything is.
But this is especially so, I think.
Well, it's easy to look at this and be like, oh, they want to be Kurt Cobain.
I think because he wraps it up very much in being about him and his own story and where he lives now. So
Yeah,
therefore
loads of people are trying to
he
do
used
that.
as a kind of... Is a that's the sort of caveat for it, isn't it? Basically, that actually this is about my life in LA, bits of Paris, and therefore it's his own kind of narrative, his own sort of folklore, if you like. Which seems like actually when you have this huge stage, it's just wrong to be doing that now. You have to have more responsibility than that, surely.
Yeah, loads of
Because
designers
he has
are trying
a
to do
huge
that.
voice, and I think anyone who has a voice has to understand responsibility. Otherwise you just become a stereotype of a fashion designer, and who needs that? None of us need that.
I think the problem with it, what is difficult though, is as much as we all sit here and criticise it, there is something that people are engaging with, and it's difficult in a way to say how bad and problematic it is, because by doing that, you're kind of, there's an element where you're criticising what people actually want to wear, and that's what I find really difficult, is how does kind of, challenging this go beyond us just sitting here and going, oh, Eddie Slimane sucks, as do we not need more people who are actually kind of speaking to those shoppers and challenging them, because people are obviously identifying with it and wanting to buy it, and I think the conversation, the criticism of him has got even more kind of niche and just within the fashion community, and that's what I find quite difficult with it sometimes, is you always get to a point where there are some people who won't write about it or won't cover it, for example, and I think you have to. If you're a fashion journalist, this is having a huge, massive impact on what people are wearing,
well,
like
I guess,
it or not.
They're ultimately these are if you look at them as characters, if you like, these are characters that are much easier to inhabit. And there's probably, I imagine, if you're a fan, something that's really quite exciting about that, about being able to see yourself in that. Whereas there's a lot more fashion.
Exactly what it is.
Where it's like, we were watching like when we did the Prada show, a little while ago, and actually you're really sort of grappling with that on an intellectual level, and we're talking about pulling the pieces apart and this kind of suburban, stereotype. This kind of it's a much more difficult thing to get your head around. Whereas with this, it's a much easier access moment to get into, and I think there's something really alluring about that.
Because in a way it lacks that exclusivity.
Yeah.
I mean, I just want to pick up on something you say, because I was thinking, I don't really want him to fail though. I don't really care if people buy it or not, in a way, and it's kind of open to your own interpretation. And I think if you can inhabit this character, and it is so wearable and non-complex as a garment, as a piece of clothing that you wear, I guess it equates to the sales again, doesn't it? And you'll just think, or you go in and you find a really nice jumper, and you think that's nicely made, and I like this jumper. I don't know.
One thing he said that was interesting, I did think it was interesting when he was making the comments about almost it felt as if he was being overwhelmed by this idea of newness in terms of technological innovation, and do I want this? There was a really nice phrase about the deadly digital screens that I thought was actually one of the most revealing phrases, where it's obviously that there's something there that's really kind of haunting him about the fact that we're moving to the future, and there's
he's
all this
obviously
pressure.
incredibly conservative.
And, yeah, absolutely. And I think,
but he is like,
Do you think he's a Republican?
I I don't. But I look at it and I find it really ironic because it's all about youth, but it is. I find it so regressive, and it's interesting when you talked about androgyny because it is so like. It's quite offensive in how it shows women, but also equally offensive in how it shows men. Like,
well, everyone's too bloody thin as well, aren't they?
But it is that, but I think it goes beyond that. Like it's just. But
I think because it felt a bit like he was railing against people. You know, there are some designers there that will basically kind of innovation. They'll say, I'm going to use crazy innovative fabrics. Therefore, I'm moving to the future. I'll get really involved in wearable technologies and things like that. And it's like that's a really easy shorthand for them to do it. So it feels like he's kind of railing against that, except actually it's so regressive that there's kind of no middle ground, and actually so he's talking about this kind of wanting to connect with emotion and it almost being a much more kind of a sort of a sense of realism that for him it's almost quite sort of puritanical in that way. It's about him personally, it's about a sense of realism, it's about a sense of non-high concept, but the trouble is with that it feels like it's gone so backward that it's literally you're sort of left with this cliche, so you're kind of left with what feels a bit hollow, it feels a bit like a shell at times, so it kind of, so there's bits of what he was saying that I appreciate a lot actually in that interview. I just can't connect with it myself with seeing it because it feels like I've seen this stuff so much before that I'm looking at costume, you know. Like costume. In fact, I actually think he mentioned that somewhere as well, that actually he sees himself almost as sort of designing for like rock stars on stage, not even real rock stars.
Well, he said that with the couture thing. That's something I want to talk about next. Is he said that for the couture, he was like, oh, you know, the reason we're going to approve it all is it's going to be a very small kind of intimate operation, and it's going to be about the people that surround me. You know, most of them are artists or friends of the house, and I just thought how strange, because it is even more like just this complete. I just think there's something so vain about that in operating in that way. It's like, what's so exciting? The fashion that I find the most exciting is the one that you can't really actually pinpoint who wears it, which is why I do find something like Prada really interesting. Is I know you can always be like, oh, the woman that works in a gallery or what have you, but actually lots of people can wear Prada in a really interesting way and really make it their own. Whereas with this, it feels like you have to be a kind of within this little gang.
Because that's the ironic thing, isn't it? You know, he talks a lot about self-expression, and that's why he's putting these people on the catwalk. But actually, you kind of lose your self-identity, surely, if you're wearing this, because I feel like, you know, you're almost kind of being complicit in saying, I'll let him dress me, I'll let his vision dress me. It feels like it's very difficult to wear this.
But this isn't
truly,
a vision, is it?
You know, this
is just nostalgia. There's no vision here. It is just, I'm going to look at photos of groupies from the 70s. Here's Sable Star.
But I do think there can be something new.
Here's the New York Dolls.
You can do something new through nostalgia, though, in terms of like, I think when he first started doing Dior on Like It or Not, what he did was it felt new, and it felt of its time, and it was amazing. And there were elements of that were very nostalgic.
Well, it was a very new understanding of masculinity at the time. And I think, you know, like, you know, as we were saying here, that actually a lot of us have quite a problem with the way that women are portrayed here, particularly. You know, that's quite difficult. So actually,
the obsession with youth is off the scale here.
But it's also, isn't it, that he's the first time around he was at Saint Laurent when he did incredible stuff, and it was menswear. It was menswear that was so beautiful that it was almost like women's wear. It was so essential. But he was a young man then, and now he's a middle-aged man, and I think that does.
They ask him about that youth thing in the interview, and he says, and you know, they quote him saying that from 5 years before he'd said, fashion equals music plus youth plus sex, and I just thought,
oh, but there's nothing sexy about these girls. These girls are too thin for anyone to have sex with them.
I don't know. I think I'm not like fully thin bashing. I think like they're all way too thin, but you can be thin and have sex.
Yeah, of course you can be. You can be, but there's nothing. I don't think there's anything sexy about what he's doing to these girls. And if it is sexy, it's not empowering them.
No, it's not empowering at all. But I think it's equally as offensive to the boys. I think that's what's really weird. But I do find it so weird how separate he keeps the genders. Like, you know, it just feels really out of step with what everyone else is doing. Like, the girls look like the groupies to the male musicians. Like, the girls don't look like they're
not
in the
stars
band.
in their own right,
no, they're not. It's very like almost. It's very kind of, and that just feels really weirdly outdated when everyone else is kind of.
Well, it's where he talks about this very consistent vision on the one hand, but it's actually really all over the place, because you have got this idea about, you know, getting back to Reeve Gauche in the 60s and rebellion and whatever, and as you're saying, you've got these very different characters for menswear and womenswear, and then you've got these shops which are sort of mausoleums of luxury, just kind of white marble and kind of insanely cold and nothing at all to do with youth and energy and any of that kind of stuff, and all the elements about control. So it feels like there's lots of different things, none of which necessarily have anything to do with the baseline, perhaps, as we were kind of mentioning earlier. So you just kind of wonder where that baseline actually exists. And I suppose it shows partly how you can take something like Yves Saint Laurent and kind of twist it whichever way you want to tell.
That's what I think I mean
story.
about the sort of the intellectual reframing of these things, that you can kind of make whatever you want out of them, you know. But I think he's amazing as a kind of, you know, he's gone through this whole evolution of you know, he's a photographer, and the brand spin is something he is really, really good at. I mean, he even talks about it, you know, when he looks at the way his day pans out, you know, half the day pretty much is based on him looking at the visual merchandising and the store design and the branding. And I kind of applaud the attention to detail, but then it kind of begs the question, actually, maybe if that brand vision is so holistic, actually is the fashion kind of becoming slightly an aside to that? I mean, obviously, I'm not criticising his skill, but you know what I mean? It felt like the brand exercise is the biggest component of this whole thing in a way.
No, I think definitely. I think that comes across in how he talks about restarting the couture. There's no, I won't quote him directly, but they kind of ask him about starting that up, and there's no passion for creating couture garments in what he answers. It's very much like, well, this is the final step in the brand. That's why this is Saint Laurent, and you know, because this is the ready to wear. It's very much about like a jigsaw puzzle of a brand. It's not, you know, that I just had all these ideas and I wanted to work with an atelier. And you know, I'm not saying that would be kind of that progressive either, but I think it's at least that would have come from a genuine desire to create something.
But it's quite pragmatic, isn't it?
Yeah, incredibly pragmatic. Yeah. What do we think of? Are we excited for Saint Laurent couture?
Do you know what? Like, I'm going to try and say something positive about it. I mean, I'm interested in see how you do it, because I mean, at least, couture totally confuses me in a lot of ways. Actually, it confuses me that all of a sudden, you know, where people are reporting on, you know, couture in the same way that you're, you know, normal fashion and standard fashion weeks, and it's just having to create yet another system in this sort of tiered system to keep luxury super buoyant. With this, I mean, you know, I don't know how much more you can do with it. I don't know. I mean, obviously you can always make more expensive things. You can always, I don't know. Will it really feel that different? I don't know.
It's going to be more expensive things for kind of actresses and singers who already buy stuff from the brand.
What musicians wear this?
Yeah, good point.
He obviously gives it to them. They don't buy it themselves.
It's weird that with the celeb thing, who wears it? No one really wears it.
We got the people in the ad campaign, so the Sky Ferreras.
Yeah, but even they don't.
Kim Gordon
really wear it that much.
Did Kim Gordon do one?
Yeah.
Oh no.
And and somebody else, name's escaping. But it's quite a.
Harry Styles.
Yes, there you go.
He'll wear it. Yeah,
and
he
other
wears,
members of One Direction.
Yeah, there you go. Excellent.
But come back to the couture thing. It does. You do kind of just wonder, again, why? Because this isn't clearly not couture. This is, you know, it's this is so expensive, and it comes back to a little bit of what couture is. I mean, before we started the band, we were kind of talking a bit about. I don't like anything that he's necessarily done, but I've kind of enjoyed from a purely kind of humour point of view, seeing how it's affected Paris fashion, because it's brought an element of kind of antagonism into what was.
But also, it's so widely copied.
Yeah.
Like the aesthetic that he is putting across has trickled down across all the men's wear runways and all the women's wear runways. However cynical the people within those houses say they are about Saint Laurent, like they are definitely looking at what he's doing and shaping their aesthetic 100%. And that is worrying, but it's obviously because it's selling very well, that look, which is what's quite scary in a way.
But you wonder if it does have a time limit, because it's like, at what point, you know, it's kind of, you look at someone like Tom Ford, who at one point was so in tune with things, and at a certain point then just wasn't, and now he kind of accepts that he's not, and he's off doing kind of whatever, and you kind of think at some point, is this going to be, you know, it feels bad using words like cool, but if this is what's currently regarded as cool, at some point in the not distant future, it's presumably not going to be, and from the way he talks, you presume he's just going to carry on.
I think the problem is not that the aesthetics will stop being cool, because I don't think the aesthetics are cool at the moment. I think the problem is the concepts with which what makes that house luxurious, these notions of kind of exclusivity and a gang and, you know, a creative set of people being out in LA. I think that is already becoming deeply, deeply uncool. And, you know, cynically with the couture, I think what they're doing is by saying they're going to approve everyone and that it's going to be like their artists and musician people. It's probably not. It's going to be really rich people who want to buy it. But by saying that, it creates this kind of illusion of you buying something really special and being accepted into it. And I think, you know, this aesthetic is what it is. It's as we say, nostalgia and it's vintage. But I think the problem will come when those notions just stop being intriguing. And I think that's already happening. I think people expect more from their clothes. There's not that sense of wanting to buy into something exclusive anymore. I think people care more about things being, you know, made in an interesting way or sustainable. You know, this is so removed from all of those conversations. And I think that's when it will drop off. I think it won't be an aesthetic problem. It will be when just that notion seems really, really pathetic.
I don't know, I think the exclusivity thing is still pretty massive, because I think, you know, if you look at what's happened with digital retail, everything's become so ubiquitous that, you know, having things that feel, you know, rare or exclusive or, you know, anything difficult to come by feels, I mean, perhaps that's part of it, perhaps that's because people feel like they are buying into, bizarrely, you know, ironically feel like they are buying into that kind of vintage world where actually you only get a kind of one-off, but of course it's you don't get that many, but it's the opposite.
But fashion's taken that model, you know, one of a kind, limited edition. It's trying to do those.
So perhaps there's something in that sentiment there. I don't know, that kind of just generally that sort of the vintage thing bubbling up. That's somehow that transmits through what he's doing. So even though you're not buying a one of a kind thing, you feel like there's, I don't know, just trying to work out what. Well, thinking aloud.
But I don't really feel like. I feel like the biggest buyers of Saint Laurent are probably Asian and Russian.
I don't know. I think not that limited. I think it's quite wide.
Really?
Yeah.
I think the funny thing is, if you talk to people, I know some people who work in some of the stores, and the customers that were buying it before are still buying it.
Yeah.
It's kind of...
That's strange.
Obviously, a lot of other people, I mean, the footfall is up hugely, and a lot of new customers are coming in. But the people that were buying Saint Laurent in the 50s and 60s are still coming in and buying, because it's almost is that thing of the connection between, you know, how much those customers know that they're I mean, they can, I'm sure they can see a difference, but they're still buying Saint Laurent.
But I think what he's cleverly done is there was a good interview about the footwear business and how successful that's been, and how actually before, you know, Yves Saint Laurent wasn't somewhere that had a particularly strong footwear category, and now it does incredibly. And I think what he's done is, you know, keep enough suits and tailoring to keep that existing clientele, but then brought in, you know, all the like little rings and little kind of like cheap accessories. So you can bring in different sort of facets and bring in different shoppers. And I think that's what's interesting, is the growth is across all the different categories. It's not like he's just done one bag that's flown. And that I find quite interesting.
I think there's a lot about the cult of personality with him as well. Actually, I think, you know, we've talked about this.
What is his personality?
Like Phoebe Fibo. Well, I think it's the enigmatic thing. I think the fact that, you know, there's the big hoo-ha that he does an interview for the first time in ages, and actually there's part of, you know, he always says that he's very shy, and actually, you know, sometimes people don't do interviews because actually they don't have a lot to say. But I think there is something in that I think people find very alluring.
I wonder, do you think the people who are buying it know that much about him? I wonder if it is just, it's interesting to walk down Sloane Street, because I wonder if part of the reason it does so well goes back to what we were talking about with accessibility. Because if you walk down, like, I know Sloane Street is you know, always going to have a certain veneer, but like Saint Laurent does seem like the most present and most kind of like fresh store, because everything else looks so dated, and it's ironic that we're sitting and saying this is dated, but it does look more kind of like vibey than anything.
I think the reason we say that though is because this projects this idea of youth, but if we actually look at young designers working right now, it's so polar opposite. You know, like young designers from New York and London are so exciting.
But I think there's a fair amount of nostalgia in young designers' work.
Like who?
Quite a lot. Like, even like, I love what he does. I think he's brilliant. But someone like Charles Jeffrey, there's a huge.
I mean, that's completely nostalgic.
Yeah, exactly. So but that's interesting. That why are we accepting nostalgia in that way, but not in this way?
Because that's about a lifestyle that he's actually living.
But I think Eddie would argue that he is living this life.
What, a rock and roll lifestyle.
Yeah, he would there. He like surrounds himself with these kids. He lives in LA. You know, hangs out with those boys
in the 1960s.
But people could say the same with someone like Charles, that they could be like, you're not going to.
I think Charles is like a particular example who exists as his own, but I think there are many other young designers who aren't existing in that nostalgia. I think if you think what's happening in like New York with Vejas, Hood by Air, Telfar, there's no nostalgia there. It's about the future. It's about utopia. This is about being smug and listening to the Rolling Stones.
But then you could argue the same with Marcus Almeida. You could be like, oh my God, Kate Moss in Dazed in the 90s, good for you. Like, I don't think that. I think what they do is brilliant.
Yeah.
But there's, Caitlin Price, it's 90s nostalgia. Like there's so much nostalgia in the work of young designers, and that is a problem.
But I think in my opinion, the most interesting designers aren't
nostalgic.
And I think the ones that we're going to remember in the future aren't the ones who are being nostalgic. They're the ones who are making this kind of strange, genderless, utopian experience, which is about all different racial backgrounds. And the people who are creating it are from all different racial and sexual and gendered backgrounds, and this is not.
I was thinking about it. Do you think part of the problem is, it's interesting that we use the term young designers, not new designers, and we were talking about fashion's obsession with youth, and I wonder if part of the problem is when new designers come along, they are young, so they cite their peers around them, they design for themselves, they design for those around them. Would it be better if we had new designers who weren't young? Because that never happens really, and that's part of the problem of fashion education and kind of pumping people out.
It does happen, but I don't think anyone really cares about them.
But then why not? Do you not think that would be quite important in moving fashion on from just being about this obsession with young people?
I guess it's because it's just not how the system works usually.
Yeah.
There are some people, I mean, you've got people like Martina Spetlova that was, like a chemist before, and then she sort of became a fashion designer at like 30, 31 or something. But you don't, I think it's just not how the fashion education system works, therefore it won't really happen so much.
I just think we can blame something like this for being youth obsessed, but the whole system is youth obsessed. Like we as journalists, we always want the new thing, we always want the young person, like style magazines.
But I think everyone,
cool,
not just fashion,
people.
everyone wants the new thing.
Yeah.
Art wants the new thing, music wants the new thing, and that usually does come from youth. But I think in fashion it's just more complex because it comes about the body. So I think, fashion, it's just more prevalent because it can objectify people far more easily than any other realm of culture, but everything's obsessed with youth. So everyone's just always chasing the new idea, what's going to be the most important thing, what's going to be the new school of thought, what's going to define our generation. We want to be involved in whatever is happening right now. We want to experience the zeitgeist, but this isn't zeitgeist.
But it is interesting in those terms. It is interesting it's almost like someone's deliberately putting not even a full stop, but a full stop with a backward slider on it, to almost kind of put the stick in the ground to sort of say, I don't want to move on, which is you can look at it in different ways. It could be just being very deliberately antagonistic, or it could be actually consciously not being able to move on. Now he's got older, perhaps it's that thing that he still thinks he's in a moment of time, but he's not in that moment of time any longer, and not being able to let go of
But
that.
he was never in that moment of time. I think it's really strange. He was never living in the 60s.
But I think, as in with the sort of Dior on.
Yeah.
I think that's when you sort of felt like actually that's something that feels quite, symbolic of the time in a way.
Yeah, little one. Should we, should we look at what he's done for this season and have a little ponder? So just to kind of relate to what we were talking about in terms of the couture and saying how can he take this forward, there are some couture pieces within this collection, which is going to be fun for us to try and spot them. Fun game. Just a little bit of background to the show. It's Larry Bell Glassworks and Construction, so he always does the notebook of artist work. So obviously that's a Californian artist. The set, it's a rotating robotic cube. It's and the collection focuses on historic kind of sheer and lace couture pieces, so it's very much, in some ways more about evening wear than we've seen before, she says, looking at a pair of jeans. What do we think of the opening looks?
There were 3 of them, and it's weird because, like I said earlier, it's kind of the last thing you do is look at the clothes, because I think you come into it with so much we kind of all know in a way what we think of what he's doing. It's one of the collections almost hardest to kind of look at, and like you're saying, when you take it apart, there's probably lots of great jumpers or whatever, but you do sort of just look at the impact. You look at what you see on screen, and you see sort of the morning after, and you see weight, and you see whiteness, and you see all the things that kind of you knew were going to get your back up. So it's weirdly hard to talk about clothes in a way that actually, if you just straightforwardly...
I don't understand why they're all going to Glastonbury.
They are actually wearing wellies.
They are actually wearing wellies.
You're right, love. It's so hot. I know. It's absolutely boiling. Can we turn off one ring of the lights? It's just got one on. Can you do that?
Sorry. Great.
I've got to stop being so mean about it.
No, but it is.
I feel like I'm
difficult,
being very negative. I can't help myself though.
No, you don't have to stop being mean about it. I think it's important that people speak out about it. Oh my god, I was worried about you. I was like, please don't pass out. Please don't pass out. It's so uncomfortable.
Probably bright red face.
Thanks. Thanks.
But it is that exactly that familiarity. You feel like you've seen
heat issues.
loads of editorials with someone in boots and a slip and a tiara.
Yeah.
You know, it's just
Yeah,
so.
it feels like
He's
a
used the
classic
phase.
fashion.
It's very
thematic,
Kate,
doesn't
Kate
it?
Moss one, isn't it?
He's
Yeah.
talked about grunge tiaras in it, which I just think
Okay.
is so...
Like, you know there will be a parka any minute. Do you know what I mean? There's bound to be.
But they're literally wearing like floral wellies.
And I shouldn't know that,
No.
really.
Really?
Yeah, they are.
Where's the flowers?
You can't see them because it's
Why
very dark.
are they wearing tiaras? Because all girls just want to be a princess. You know?
Festy chic, eh?
We're just looking for our Prince Charming.
In the
We want
field.
a rock star boyfriend in a field in Glastonbury. Where are you? Let me be a
Yeah, see, there's a
groupie.
parka. Look, there's a parka. I think it's even camouflage.
Oh yeah, it is.
But there's what I just don't get is it's like
Oh god, that's bloody awful, isn't it? With the tiger on it.
it's like people. Oh, I just find it so embarrassing because I was thinking the other day, but you know, if you're one of those girls who like had gone out with like some indie guy in a band, how it because I remember being 16 and I thought
I did. I went out with a drummer.
But are you embarrassed about it now?
No, he's a very nice guy.
I know I've been with quite a lot
Hi,
of
Jay.
musicians.
No, I did, and they were one of the most, he won't be watching, famous failures of that whole thing. They were the last ones, and
Yeah.
there was a lot of money spent on them, and it didn't work out. And I feel like it's so weird to look at this. You know, when you had the men's scrolling down, I was like, oh my god, there's like one of them really looked like him, and I think it's so indulgent to kind of take that back, which is just really it's not very long ago.
No, that's what I find weird. Is it's like you can see her pants through her dress. It's just I just find it really. I don't think anyone aspires to that lifestyle anymore. That's what I find really strange.
But I think what this is saying is like it's aspirational to be a groupie, and it's aspirational to be like a rock star's girlfriend. And you know what? The reality of that is not that great. Being with a narcissist is not the ideal world that a girl wants to live in.
But do you think I don't even think a lot of young women aspire to that anymore. I think
this is what it's trying to say though, isn't it? Being rock, being backstage, being with the band.
But it even feels out of. I think there's other things that celebrate, going out with a rich
Oh no, there is a
guy
black
or
girl.
excess.
There's one there.
Like you could argue that Balmain is about that kind of lifestyle of like the luxury lifestyle. But even that feels more relevant to this. Do you know what I mean? Like that notion of kind of like. I think a lot of young women, probably do want to be rich and famous, but I don't know if they want it like this. That's what I find really strange.
It's just, it's really difficult to know what to say, apart from you just feel like he's just curating stuff more than designing. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, sorry.
It feels like it's a sort of curation of just his favourite stuff.
Yeah.
But do you think he actually does just go vintage shopping all day and then just copy things?
Yeah, they do. They send out, but all designers do that. Absolutely, all
No,
designers.
but like, I mean, this is so specific.
yeah, they do.
It's
They
like
send,
Oh my
direct
god,
copy.
look at those dungaree shorts. Now that's shocking.
There's a visual thing that if you put this on a white stage and you were told it was Topshop, you wouldn't think any different. Yeah, or if it was a Primark.
It could be
lookbook or
River
whatever,
Island.
that's the-
In fact,
yeah.
River Island will probably pick up. This is totally their aesthetic. Isn't
Yeah.
it?
I mean, I find this strange because I've only ever worn. It sounds very pretentious, but I've only ever worn vintage clothing. Like my dad, kind of having had a job, but one of his like passions was he used to collect vintage denim and leather, like very rare vintage denim and leather from the 40s, 50s, even 30s. So growing up, like I used to only, when I was little, I used to only wear vintage clothing, and then growing up, that's all I've ever done. So seeing this just really does kind of hurt my head, because the process of vintage shopping is about like going out and finding something. You go to a market, you go to a car boot sale, you go on eBay, you know, and it's like it's going through like a personal search, and it's about kind of like creating your own self. And this is just saying, here it is for you. You don't have to think.
Do you not think vintage has got quite sort of I feel like vintage is so commercial now as well. It's not that same thing of wandering into a store and finding something fantastic. Like if you go to vintage stores in London, things are so expensive.
Oh yeah. But they're still incredible.
But
stuff
I almost feel like
Yeah.
a bit like vintage shopping now. Like quite often, like I'll go to like jumble sales, like literally car boot sales, which is sort of technically another way
Yeah.
of vintage shopping, really. Even
Yeah.
if it's like from a couple of years ago, that sort of feels like it for me. I think the problem is I feel like I need to be satisfied by this. I need it to be reconstituted in some way, to like hit these ideas to be reappropriated.
It has to have a
and they're
context.
so and then it's just so directly like wholesale taken from one place, boom, bangs into another. It's difficult to give it much love.
I mean, the tiaras freak me out. The tiaras are really weird because
It's a really weird styling
Jean
thing,
Benet,
isn't it?
but it's just really random. Like it's really, really out of step with.
I think it'd also be nice, you know, I'd have a lot more respect for this collection if it had some continuity, but it doesn't.
Do you know that I think there's so much continuity? It's just the same stuff again and again and again.
It's the same stuff again and again and again, but not in design. It is
No.
just.
But I feel like I could before this collection started have written you a list of what would be in it, and I guarantee everything I'd written would probably be in there.
Wellingtons.
I probably wouldn't have said Wellingtons. I probably wouldn't have said tiaras either, but I would have been like, you know, little denim,
Yeah.
like shorts type thing, like bias cut dress, lots of. It's just it's so.
What music do you think he's listening to at the moment?
So the music playing at the show was The Mirror by Damaged Bug.
Yeah, but you know, but like what kind of like?
Of course it was.
Do you think? I mean, this makes me think he's listening to a bit of Hole, potentially, right?
Yeah.
But what else do you think he's been listening to? I mean, I think maybe a bit of the Libertines, which is a bit tragic, really.
Probably
isn't
the
it?
Liberties, but they're back now.
New
so
album.
Yeah, it's exciting. Are you thrilled?
No, I'm not. What is he listening to?
I think he's just disengaged from youth culture though, but this happens with all designers where they are so much in their bubble that, you know, I doubt he spends any time on the street. I think he probably thinks he does, but I don't think he does. Like,
That's a really interesting comment, actually. I think that's the trouble, isn't it? You get to a certain stage and then, you know, it's so indulged to have come back and been given this huge platform, and because you get in the interview, you get the impression, as was obvious anyway in a way, that actually you almost feel like there is no limit to what he'd be given, what resources he'd be given, what he would be indulged with, sort of ideas-wise. And that's probably a really dangerous place to be in, isn't it? I mean, how do you... It's a bit like, you know, like when bands do their like second or third album, and actually once they've made loads of money, it's a bit difficult to write about life on, you know, the hard knock life when actually you're living in a penthouse somewhere and you'll never have to suffer.
But
worrying
that's
about
the
rent
problem
again.
with this, is it just feels so removed from. Yeah. I mean,
That's why I'm saying, like, what's he listening to at the moment? I wonder what he's listening to. Do you think he buys records, listens to vinyl?
But I wonder who he's hanging out with. Like, what girls does he spend time with?
He probably doesn't actually spend any time with any girls.
Yeah, I do.
I mean, looking at these women, none of these are real women to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I have an inappropriate story, but it's just not my story. It's completely someone else's.
That sounds perfect.
Yeah.
Best stories are.
Yeah. So anyway, one of the girls that he cast in his early shows is from LA and like a hipster, and or whatever, you know, relevant there. She's young and friends, and so she got to her fitting, and they said, "Oh, here's what you've got to try on," and she was so confused because it was it was a complete copy of one of her outfits in like new nice fabric, and from her like Facebook picture or something, or an Instagram picture. And she was just like, "This is so weird. Like, this guy's been stalking me, or what?" Like,
So what does she do? Does she do the
she
show?
wore it. She just wore it, but she was stressed. I mean, that's so weird.
Yeah, that is really
But
weird.
that's the thing, isn't it? Like, I don't feel it's enough to just say my skill is basically, you know, elevating this by doing it in the fabrics that working for a luxury fashion house provides you. Like, that isn't enough, I don't think.
But
to
that's
be in
one
that
of the
position.
downsides, I think, of how casual like dressing has become, which in some ways is really brilliant. But I think one of the problems with that is because people don't dress up anymore, ideas of like, you know, nonchalance and effortlessness have become really, really important and synonymous with luxury in a really new way. And I think actually
This is
creating
exactly what
stuff
this
that
is,
feels
yeah.
like that, this is what it's not trying to feel elevated. Look at it, it's a camo jacket, but it's trying to capture that kind of unattainable quality, which actually a lot of people do want when they get dressed. They want to look really effortless. They want to look really, you know,
They want to pass.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what this is about. So maybe that's why he does find these kids where he thinks they do encapsulate that ethos.
Oh, but I mean, come on,
and
look at the
copy
back of that horrible 80s jacket. That's absolutely unacceptable. That's like the
No,
worst
but
shit
look
you'd
at
find to be on
that
retro.
skirt is like the one where you cut your jeans when you
Top
were
shop.
young,
My
and then
mum-
you
my
put
mum
the
did one of
panel
those.
in. I did
Yeah.
one. I had one.
Yeah.
Paul Frank jeans. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also this tie
I'd like to think we all have.
15.
It really
Yeah.
is
So I
like
look
the
great.
worst shit in the worst vintage shop on Brick Lane.
Yeah, that is what's weird about this collection. Is this more than a lot of them?
The last one I
vintage
could
doesn't even look
respect
good.
more because it was, you know, more of the kind of like beautiful elegance of the 60s.
Yeah.
But this is just like, and also, you know, there's no kind of politics behind the clothes. These clothes, you know, if he rips off the 60s or even like 1970s punk, you can kind of understand that there's a rebellion and there's a reason for people dressing like this. I don't feel like there's any particular reason for what he's
She just
replicating
wants a cool
here.
boyfriend. She wants to go out
She
with
wants a cool
Pete
boyfriend.
Doherty.
She doesn't want to eat anything.
Also, I think a lot of other designers who, you know, you were saying become aren't in touch anymore. They aren't trying to be.
Yeah.
So their
Yeah.
clothing doesn't apply to this
Which
conversation.
is why Tom Ford was quite
Yeah.
a nice example.
So
of
that's really where it kind of chokes in that sense. But also at this time, it was so fashionable to get as wasted as you possibly could. That's so unfashionable now. You know, everyone's drinking juices, and you know, obviously people are still having fun. But there is a much bigger shift, certainly in the media, to staying fit and healthy. And
Yeah, and some of the younger designers do pursue that in an interesting way. It's quite celebratory of the body and of a healthy body and of a healthy human. And
Yeah.
There's nothing healthy about these girls.
No,
They need to-
exactly,
look at that
yeah.
one. She definitely needs to eat a cake, doesn't she?
she's
Poor thing.
I just find the thing where you can see the pants through it quite offensive because it's just like,
Also, that girl does look about 13 as well.
yeah, they're so young.
So he's completely sexualising her.
But I don't even think she looks sexual. She just looks,
Why can we see her pants?
Just exposed, yeah.
yeah, she just looks exposed. Exactly, there's a difference.
And I think, I mean, this is where I guess prejudice is about what you should do with a coming back to an existing house. And you kind of think, you can kind of, as I say, Saint Laurent was around for decades. You can kind of pick and choose what you want. But if you're looking at it, you kind of go, well, Saint Laurent was always about kind of celebration and kind of these gorgeous, sexy women of all
Empowered
races
women.
and sort of, you know, it was about that. There was a warmth to it. There was a kind of a real love. I know that sounds really cheesy.
But what's
Um,
weird is Piaget absolutely loves it.
Yeah.
Which is,
Yeah.
that I can't compute.
Yeah.
I find that really strange. But then I wonder if it is just a complete detachment from young people and they think that this is like really cool. You know, when it's like,
really
This
cool.
is about pleasing the people who've got the money who can afford it.
yeah.
That's all it is. I mean, to me, that's how I see it. It's about pleasing new money, right?
It just kind of scares me. You know, like, I just find it really
Bleak.
bleak. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
the
why
way-
why does she have to be so thin and have the clothes falling off her like that? Why is she wearing a fucking tiara? Like,
Because she's special.
Because he loves a bit of melancholy, doesn't he?
Yeah.
You know.
it's turning the woman into an infant, you know, as well.
But I think there's this strange, that I actually feel sorry for him for, and I really did when I read that interview, because there's this weird thing of him trying to make his 15-year-old self cool. Like, that's
it's
really
so
dark. And he kind
self-indulgent.
of talks about that in the thing, you know, that he was bullied for being really skinny and this body shape. So now he's like really pushing it. Like, that's just really fucked up. Like, it's really weird. So, fine. Like, it bothers me, obviously, because I think it's really offensive to do a catwalk that is like 98% white women who are incredibly unwell and skinny from the looks of how they're presented. I'm sure not
And
all of
also,
these
they're all
women
very
are.
white.
Yeah.
You know, they're not. None of them are kind of like Caucasian but dark. They are white.
But that's the crux of it, isn't it? You know, he's fulfilling his teenage original grunge era self. It's being able to be in a place where actually you can indulge yourself. And if you can indulge yourself and be antagonistic enough to kind of be this divisive, why not?
But
You
it's
know.
like a stroppy teenager and being like, look, I can do it now and I'm
Oh,
really
you know
cool.
what? The world doesn't need it. It's a waste of clothing. It's a waste of energy. It's polluting the world. You know what? If we all stopped making clothes today, there'd be enough clothes in the world for us all to dress for the rest of our lives. Why is he making this It's a waste of fabric, it's a waste of trees, it's a waste of fuel, it's a waste of energy. All it does is going to make more girls feel bad about themselves, more girls have bloody eating disorders, and more rich people feel smug about themselves. So there you go.
It's quite a good note to end on. Should we give him a passive-aggressive round of applause?